Here's how the Tearlaments cards work. Every Tearlaments card has a powerful main effect, as well as a secondary effect whenever it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, making them similar to the Shaddoll archetype. These effects can vary from gaining you advantage in some way, like the Tearlaments Spell and Trap cards, or can instead be used to perform fusion summons, like with Scheiren, Havnis, and Merrli, by placing fusion materials from your hand, field, or graveyard on the bottom of your deck. This effect can be used to summon out any fusion monster you want, with the only restriction being that one of the materials you use must be the Tearlaments monsters you activate in the grave. With these effects, you can access a number of insane boss monsters, including its archetypal bosses. There's Kitkallos for swarming and milling, Rulkallos, which beats Nibiru and Bestials, and Kaleido-Heart, which can spin back any card your opponent controls back into the deck. As a result of all the Tearlaments cards having powerful graveyard effects, most of the Tearlaments cards have some kind of effect to send cards to the graveyard by either milling cards from top of the deck, foolishing cards, or by sending a card from the hand or field to the graveyard. This made most Tearlaments strategies highly graveyard focused, with most decks incorporating powerful graveyard effects such as the likes of Fairy Tale Snow and the Ishizu engine, which helps cement them to tier 0 status. In fact, Tearlaments as a strategy is so strong that in every format where they've been released, they've had severe hits on the ban list, and were even pre-hit in Master Duel before they even came to the game. So depending on the format you play, your Tearlaments ratios are going to differ drastically. When Tear was at full power, you would play 3 copies of Perlereino, Reinoheart, Scheiren, Havnis, Merrli, and alongside 1 or 2 copies of Tearlaments Sulliek. And depending on the meta, you could play a copy of Crime, Meta Noise, Heartbeat, Perlegia, and or Grief as one-ofs in the main or side, with 1 to 2 copies of Kitkallos alongside at least 1 Rulkallos and a Kaleido-Heart in the extra deck. Astute observers may have noticed this is pretty much every single Tearlaments card in the archetype. And the reason for that is because there aren't really any bad Tearlaments cards, giving the deck insane adaptability. However, currently in the TCG, Kitkallos is banned, and Scheiren, Havnis, and Merrli are all limited to 1 copy. The OCG also has the same hits, but also has Perlereino and Reinoheart limited. And the crazy part is, even despite these incredibly restrictive hits, Tearlaments as a deck is still quite playable in both formats. The same is true of Master Duel, where the deck was pre-hit before the cards even got to the game. However, these hits weren't as restrictive as either TCG or the OCG, because while Perlereino is limited in Master Duel, you can still play Reinoheart at 3, Scheiren, Havnis, and Merrli at 2, and Kitkallos is still legal at 1 copy. But because Master Duel's cards release are a bit behind the OCG and TCG, you can't play the likes of Tearlaments Kashtira yet. But when it does eventually release, it's likely to be played at multiple copies, just like it was in other formats, since it's an amazing extender. And now let's take a look at what makes this deck so strong by looking at what the Tearlaments actually do, starting off with their field spell, Primeval Planet Perlereino. In the Visas Starfrost lore, every archetype comes with its own field spell that has 3 effects. One which searches on activation, a continuous attack boost, and a pop, and Perlereino might just be one of the best ones currently available in the game. The strength of a search is often based on the targets that you can search, and Perlereino basically acts as extra copies of any Tearlaments monster, giving it a ton of versatility since you can add Reinoheart or Merrli if you need a starter, Scheiren if you need an extender, or Havnis and Tearlaments Kashtira if you want interruption. You can even search Visas Starfrost, and most Tearlaments builds don't actually run Visas. It being searchable with Perlereino means you can search this particular field spell with a graveyard effect of Trevi Karma, which is really important in formats where Perlereino is limited like Master Duel or the OCG. Its second effect might even seem relatively minor, because all it does is give every Tearlaments monster and every fusion monster you control a 500 attack buff, but this small increase goes a long way by turning your fusion boss monsters into absolute powerhouses that are incredibly hard to out. A 2200 attack Winda can be difficult out for most decks, but not impossible, but it gets a lot harder to deal with once it reaches 2700 attack. And while most decks might have a way to crash into Tearlaments Kaleido-Heart with 3000 attack, most decks will struggle to deal with it once it reaches 3500. And last but not least, Perlereino's third effect, where you can trigger whenever a Tearlaments monster is returned to the deck, such as by an Ishizu Shuffler or their own fusion effects, and allows you to target any card in the field and destroy it with it being a hard once per turn. This effect is insanely versatile and can be used during your turn to remove your opponent's powerful boss monsters in back row, or can even be used as interruption during your opponent's turn by shuffling back your own Tearlaments with their fusion effects. But that's not where the versatility ends, because instead of popping your opponent's cards, you can also pop your own in order to trigger the graveyard effects of your Tearlaments, which you can use in order to start comboing off, making it a really interesting way of starting or extending your combos as well. More often than not though, Planet's best use is as a searcher for the archetype, which you can use to grab your starters such as Tearlaments Merrli. Merrli has 2 effects. Its second effect is its graveyard effect that's shared by both Scheiren and Havnis, where if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can perform a fusion summon by putting materials from your hand, deck, or graveyard on the bottom of your deck, including itself. But its unique effect is what happens when it's normal or special summoned, where you get to mill 3 cards from the top of your deck. This effect is quite strong in a deck like Tear, because it gives you a chance to trigger some of your powerful graveyard effects to combo off. Most of the Tearlaments monsters have an effect to mill cards in some way, but what makes Merrli uniquely powerful is that it's a level 2 monster. This gives it some really interesting synergy with the sprite cards, and even allowed for some hybrid builds of Tearlaments to thrive with a large sprite engine in the main deck. But in most Tearlaments strategies, Merrli is used in combination with either Sprite Elf to revive Merrli during your opponent's turn as some extra interruption, or is sent by the effect of Sprite Sprint from the deck to the graveyard in order to trigger its fusion effect. Depending on the format you're in, however, Merrli's utility can vary, because Elf is banned in the OCG and in the TCG, and in Master Duel Sprint hasn't been released yet. But Elf is still legal, so you can still use Merrli as an interruption during your opponent's turn if you're set up. But if you want to be able to combo on your turn 0, you'll be relying on Tearlaments Havnis. Havnis has the same fusion effect as Merrli, but its unique effect is actually a quick effect that can be activated in the hand in response to an opponent's on-field monster effect. And it allows you to special summon Havnis from your hand and then build 3 cards to the top of your deck. And in any format where a mass of Tearlaments and Shizu cards are legal at the same time, Havnis becomes one of the best hand traps in the game. Because if you can fill your deck with a ton of powerful mills, Havnis becomes an amazing threat that can put a stop to your opponent's combo by letting you combo off at the same time, letting you drown an advantage while your opponent's combos are interrupted by a turn 0 window. This dynamic makes Havnis both really strong and interesting, because while most hand traps like Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler are designed to stop an opponent's action, Havnis instead allows your opponent's effects to go through, but punishes them instead by letting you reach your entire engine during their turn. And then, if you need to, you can tailor whatever boss monster you need for your opponent's combo, letting you access Kaleido-Heart to shovel back your opponent's important combo piece, or Dragostapelia if you really need your sprite opponent's monsters to be converted into a level 1 monster, or to just negate monster effects. But if you just need an extender on your own turn, it's hard to get a better option than Tearlaments Scheiren. Scheiren has the same fusion effect as the other main deck Dark Aqua monsters, but its unique effect allows you to summon it from your hand, then send a monster from your hand to the graveyard, and then mill the top 3 cards of your deck. Now, sending a monster from your hand to the graveyard can technically be seen as a downside, since you're going -1 just for a special summon and a mill. However, this is actually an insane benefit since it helps you activate the graveyard effects of the other monsters in your hand. Because Scheiren sends from your hand to the graveyard, it means you can easily trigger the Ishizu Millers, and because it sends for effect and not cost, it can also be used to activate the graveyard effects of your other Tearlaments monsters to go into your fusions. But like with Merrli, Scheiren gains a lot of versatility from its level. It being an extender that's level 4 means that the strategy has really easy rank 4 access, since Scheiren alongside an Ishizu monster or a Reinoheart can give you access to Baguska or an Abyss Dweller, which can be game-winning in the mirror. It also means that you have easy access to Time Thief Redoer, one of the only Xyz monsters in the game that detaches for effect and not for cost. This means that in Tearlaments, even if you don't have a trap attached to Redoer, it's still a powerful interruption tool since you can detach your Tearlaments Scheiren to trigger its graveyard effect during your opponent's turn and start fusion summoning. Speaking of level 4 monsters, there's also Tearlaments Reinoheart, the deck's main starter and Visa's equivalent that's a key combo piece for the strategy. But unlike other main deck Tearlaments monsters, Reinoheart isn't a Dark Aqua monster. It's a Water Warrior. When Reinoheart is normal or special summoned, you get to send a Tearlaments monster other than Reinoheart from your deck to the graveyard, allowing you to instantly fusion to the likes of Kitkallos off of just a single normal summon. But Reinoheart's graveyard effect is actually quite different from the other Tearlaments monsters, since when it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon Reinoheart and then send a Tearlaments monster from your hand to the graveyard, but then you have to banish it when it leaves the field. And just like Scheiren's hand effect, Reinoheart's graveyard effect has a lot of utility since it can be used to trigger the graveyard effects of any of the Tearlaments monsters you've drawn. And since it can also send Tearlaments Spell and Trap cards, you can use Reinoheart to trigger the graveyard effects of cards like Sulliek and Scream, which is a boon from the deck's consistency. And because Reinoheart's graveyard effect and on-summon effect can be used in the same turn, milling a Reinoheart off of one of your Tearlaments cards is a huge benefit because it gives you a free Foolish of any of your other Tearlaments monsters. Another strong aspect of Reinoheart though is its name, because it's one of the required materials for Tearlaments Kaleido-Heart. Because in order to fusion summon Kaleido-Heart, you need to fuse Reinoheart in any 2 Aqua monsters. It can't be fused away with your opponent's Super Poly or a Tearlaments effect, since it can't be used as a fusion material at all, even while in the graveyard due to its condition. Now, Kaleido-Heart's first effect actually has 2 ways it can be triggered, allowing you to target any card your opponent controls and shuffle it back into the deck when Kaleido-Heart is special summoned, or if an Aqua monster is sent to your graveyard by a card effect. This makes Kaleido-Heart a premier removal tool for the strategy, since you're always going to be milling Aqua monsters anyway in order to make your plays, so this gives you a free way to remove your opponent's cards from the field without triggering any potential graveyard effects. And because this effect can also be used on summon, you can fuse into Kaleido-Heart during your opponent's turn with your Tearlaments monsters to use its removal as interruption for your opponent's combo. But, like with the main deck cards, Kaleido-Heart also has an insanely powerful graveyard effect when it's sent there by a card effect, and allows you to special summon Kaleido-Heart from your graveyard and then send a Tearlaments card from your deck to the graveyard. This effect is absurd, because not only do you get the opportunity to send any Tearlaments monster to the graveyard to continue fusion summoning, but you also have the option of sending any Tearlaments Spell or Trap card, and by having a choice of what you send, the deck's consistency goes through the roof to trigger whatever graveyard effect you need at any given time. Especially since Kaleido-Heart is so easy to trigger, since it can be done with either Kitkallos' effect, or even popping it with your own Perlereino. One of the best targets you can send with Kaleido-Heart is Tearlaments Scream, because if Scream is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can search out any Tearlaments trap card. But even Scream's on-field effect is amazing, because while you control it, whenever a monster is normal or special summoned, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. And then it applies a lingering effect, which reduces the attack of all monsters your opponent controls, and will control by 500 until the end of the turn. So even if a monster isn't on the field by the time Scream is activated, it will still have its attack reduced. This attack modification is actually quite relevant, because with the likes of Perlereino, it makes every one of your monsters even more difficult to out, especially when paired with Perlereino's buff. But it's the first part of this effect that makes it so relevant, because on your turn, it's an extender that can mill extra cards so you can siege your graveyard and make your plays. But because Scream triggers when any monster is normal or special summoned, it can be used to punish your opponent for trying to combo off by acting as interruption, milling 3 cards and allowing you to potentially start your combo on their turn. And because its graveyard effect is so versatile, Scream is often played at multiple copies so you can take advantage of its on-field effect and graveyard effect at the same time. Since the Tearlaments trap cards are so powerful, they're worth searching. The worst of these traps is Tearlaments Metanoise, a Book of Moon that allows you to foolish any Tearlaments monster directly from your deck. And when it's milled, you get to target a Tearlaments monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Even for being the worst of the Tearlaments trap cards, Metanoise is still absurd and could potentially be game-winning in certain matchups like Sprite or Kashtira. The only reason it never saw as much play as the others is because the strength of its effect is really dependent on the decks that existed in the meta that weren't Tear, since Metanoise was never really that strong in a mirror match. Combined with the fact that its graveyard effect is kind of mediocre, it meant that Metanoise is more of an option rather than a must include. Crime's graveyard effect also isn't the best since it can only add a banished Tearlaments monster to your hand. This can be useful alongside Tearlaments Kashtira, or if your opponent has been using Bystials to banish your Tears, but when compared to other graveyard effects in the deck, it's not really a card you'd want to mill. But Crime still saw a ton of competitive play, and a huge reason for that was because of its primary effect. Since Crime is a counter trap card that lets you negate the activation of any spell or trap card or monster effect while you control a Tearlaments monster, then shovel that card into the deck, and then send a monster from your hand to the graveyard. Sending a monster for effect from the hand isn't really a cost for Tearlaments at all, so Crime was basically a free Omni-Negate that allowed your deck to easily beat board breakers such as Evenly Matched for free. And if it wasn't being used to stop board breakers, it was an insane interruption for combo strategies that was hard to interact with. But out of all the Tearlaments trap cards, the most powerful one you usually be searching for is Tearlaments Sulliek. Sulliek strikes the perfect balance of having an insanely powerful on-field effect as well as an amazing graveyard effect. Its field effect can only be activated while you control a Tearlaments monster or Visa Starfrost. It allows you to target and affect monster your opponent controls to negate its effects permanently, but then you have to send a monster you control to the graveyard. And if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add any Tearlaments monster from your deck to your hand. Both of these effects are absurd and give Sulliek an insane amount of versatility. With its on-field effect, you're getting a free interruption every turn since it's a continuous trap card that stays in the field, allowing you to keep permanently negating your opponent's combo pieces and boss monsters, all the while sending Tearlaments monsters you control to the graveyard so you can trigger their graveyard effects, letting you get yet another way to perform fusion summons on your opponent's turn. And if you happen to mill Sulliek off of any other Tearlaments effect, it has the strongest effect of all 3 of the Tearlaments trap cards, basically being an extra rota that allows you to search for whatever Tearlaments monster you need at any given moment. In terms of the other Tearlaments spells and traps though, they're usually not played unless a specific meta calls for their use. For example, Tearlaments Heartbeat was used during the time Mystic Mine was legal, as it gave the deck a searchable way of adding your opponent's floodgates. Perlereino saw minor experimentation to send King of the Swamp to the graveyard after Tear was hit in the OCG and TCG, and while Grief never saw that much competitive play, it's still a decently strong extender that can be used to trigger your Tearlaments graveyard effects. The issue with these cards was never that they were bad, it was just that Tearlaments had so many insane cards they could play that it could never find room for cards that were just good or okay. And even right now, with all the restrictions placed on Tearlaments, the deck is still rogue relevant in the OCG and TCG with different builds being made viable with the help of Kashtira and Lunalight engines, alongside its legal fusion boss monsters like Kaleido-Heart and Tearlaments Rulkallos. Especially Rulkallos, a boss monster that's so strong, even with one of its materials banned, it still sees consistent play in Tearlaments strategies. In order to fuse into Rulkallos, you need Tearlaments Kitkallos and any other Tearlaments monster, making it real easy to go into in a format where Kitkallos is legal, but even in formats where Kitkallos is banned, Tearlaments strategies just play King of the Swamp in order to act as a fusion substitute so they can still access Rulkallos. And it's more than worth it to summon it in either instance, because Rulkallos has 3 crazy effects. Its first effect protects all of your other aqua monsters from being destroyed by battle, making it impossible for your opponent to try to beat over the likes of Scheiren and Merrli. This was especially important in Tearlaments builds that played a heavy sprite package, as it meant that Rulkallos could protect your Dupe Frog and Totally Awesome from being destroyed by battle or something like a Bystial. Speaking of which, Rulkallos' second effect was also the perfect way to deal with Bystials, because whenever your opponent activates a card or effect that would special summon a monster, you can negate the activation of that effect, destroy that card, and then send a Tearlaments card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard. This effect was insanely important in the post-DABL format of the TCG, because it put a stop to the recently released Bestials, and even one of the deck's biggest counters, Nibiru the Primal Being, which is why you'll often see Tearlaments decks racing to reach Rulkallos as quickly as possible. Especially because this effect as an interruption during your opponent's turn is really solid. And like with every other Tearlaments card, Rulkallos sends for effect and not for cost, which means the downside of this effect is also a benefit, because you can use it to trigger the graveyard effects of your Tearlaments cards. But you can even just send Rulkallos, as if a fusion summon Rulkallos is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon it back to the field. Now, you can only revive Rulkallos once, because after it's been brought back by its own effect, it no longer counts as being fusion summoned, so if it's sent to the graveyard again, you won't be getting it back. But regardless, this effect is still a great tool for recursion that you'll be using alongside Rulkallos' second effect, as well as after sending it to the graveyard with the effects of Tearlaments Sulliek. And the best part of it is, because Rulkallos is one of the few water monsters in the archetype, your opponent won't be able to stop it with the likes of a Bestial, but it is at least still vulnerable to the likes of Ghost Spell and DD Crow. In general, Rulkallos is a powerhouse of a card that helped turn Tear from powerful to nearly invincible, since it managed to deal with a ton of its biggest counters. And if it's ever accessible, Tearlaments is always in a decent position. But the card that, more than anything else, allowed for Tearlaments to reach its Tier 0 status in multiple different formats is Tearlaments Kitkallos, the craziest card in the archetype that's currently banned in the TCG and OCG, and was pre-hit to be limited in Master Duel. Now, you can access Kitkallos by fusing together any Tearlaments monster with any Aqua monster, which just means a single Reinoheart summon gets you Kitkallos. And every one of its 3 effects is absurd. Its first effect happens on summon, which lets you either add a Tearlaments card from your deck to your hand, or send that Tearlaments card from your deck to the graveyard. This effect has a ton of versatility in how it can be used, because during your turn, when you fusion summon Kitkallos, you can use it for an insane consistency boost to add whatever card you need at any given time, not just monsters, which made Kitkallos great for searching out your busted Tearlaments trap cards like Sulliek or an interruption like Crime to beat board breakers. But during your opponent's turn, you can instead use Kit to send a Tearlaments monster to the graveyard, allowing you to more easily combo on turn 0 and during your opponent's turn, by letting you fuse multiple times if your Havnis happens to hit a Tearlaments. This even gives you insanely access to Rulkallos before you hit your first main phase. If Kitkallos had this effect, it would still be nearly bannably strong, but it has 2 other effects which really drive it over the top. Its second effect is a form of extension that allows you to target any monster you control, special summon a Tearlaments monster from your hand or graveyard, and then send the targeted monster to the graveyard. Usually, you'll be using this effect to bring out the likes of Tearlaments Reinoheart or Merrli to trigger their on-summon effects, while targeting Kitkallos itself to be sent to the graveyard. Because if Kitkallos is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you get to mill the top 5 cards of your deck for free. This is just absurd even just generically, because milling a ton of cards from your deck can give you access to a ton of insane graveyard effects, and is why cards like Chaos Ruler are banned, but in decks like Tearlaments, the effect is overpowered, as it basically gives you access to your entire deck. By milling a Tearlaments monster, you can combo off and start fusion summoning, and milling an Ishizu card can mill even more cards to get you access to other powerful graveyard effects, or to just shuffle back cards in your opponent's graveyard. This effect combos incredibly well with the second effect of Kitkallos, since you can use the second effect to trigger this one, all while summoning out a Merrli so that you can actually end up milling 8 cards in the same chain. And if you have the Tearlaments Scream up, you can actually end up milling 11 cards in the same chain, which is over a quarter of the minimum deck size. And if you throw in potentially milling 2 Ishizu millers as well as the effects of Scheiren and Havnis, the average Tearlaments deck is capable of milling over half of their deck in a single turn. While every Tearlaments card enables in some way, it's Kitkallos that provides the deck with an insane amount of consistency, power, and extension. There's a reason why it's banned in both the OCG and TCG, and for as long as it's legal in Master Duel, Tearlaments are going to terrorize the format, especially since there are a number of powerful cards in the way that are going to make the deck even stronger. One of those cards being Tearlaments Kashtira. You can activate Tearlaments Kashtira at any point during either player's main phase to special summon from the hand, then when it's summoned you get to mill 3 cards off of either player's deck, giving it similar utility to Tearlaments Havnis if you choose to mill your own deck. It's a bit more costly to use than Havnis though, because after you summon Tearlaments Kashtira, you need to banish a Tearlaments or Kashtira card from your hand or graveyard, which means that in order to use TK on turn 0, you need to go -1. And when TK is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can mill another 2 cards to the top of your deck, meaning that off of just 1 TK you end up milling 5 cards. Its summon being a quick effect basically gives the strategy 3 more copies of Havnis that allow you to control the exact moment you interrupt your opponent, rather than relying on them activating their on-field monster effects. This is huge for the deck because it gives you a way to combo on turn 0, even if your opponent is chain blocking their monster effects. Its banish isn't even that bad of a cost, and actually proved to be a vital benefit of the card during the time Tearlaments' biggest counter, the Bestials, were seeing competitive play, as whenever your opponent targeted Tearlaments monsters in the graveyard to banish it and summon out their Magma Hut or Druid Swarm, you could chain Tearlaments Kashtira to banish the monster they target instead. This is why, during the short time full-power Tearlaments and Tearlaments Kashtira were legal at the same time, most Tearlaments strategies play 3 copies. Some would even play Kashtira Fenrir to take advantage of their cross-archetypal status by using Fenrir to search for TK. Meanwhile, in Kashtira strategies, TK isn't played as much, but still has occasional use as a decent level 7 extender to complete the Kashtira Zone Lock that can be used to attach more materials to your Kashtira Reinoheart by milling cards and triggering a Reinoheart's mandatory attach effect. Now, TK, the Bestials, and the Kashtira monsters aren't legal in Master Duel yet, but it's important to keep these cards in mind for whenever they're released in the future to either bolster your Tearlaments strategy or to counter your opponents.